Hi, welcome to this edition of Cross Atlantic Crosstalk. We are so glad you could join us today because we have an extra special panel. I say that every time because it's true. But with us is the usual gang, Julia Doubleday and Ellie Mae O'Hagan. But joining us from the great state of Virginia is Jamaä Brickley-King, who is actually not only a longtime friend, but back when I was at Revolution Messaging, we almost made a podcast starring you. Actually, it was going to be our own branded thing that I don't remember why we didn't do, because we like to come up with plans and then not do them. And this sounds maybe like a project on the progressive left. Who knows? But listen, before we get into what was crazy in the UK, which was a deposition of Dominic Cummings that was as long as Castro's eulogy of Che in 1968. And before we hear from Jamaä about the election coming up in Virginia, that is very traditionally the kind of biggest post-presidential election to kind of see where the tea leaves are falling. I almost said tea leaves are blowing. That was not going to make any sense. But first, Julia, the state of American progressives, exciting news. Maybe you can tell us what happened with Katie Porter and an endorsement in a special race.
Yes. So Katie Porter endorsed Nina Turner in the Ohio special election for Congress for the 11th district. So,
which is Cleveland-ish.
Yeah, Cleveland-ish. So obviously it's very exciting. I think Nina Turner is just this very needed voice in Congress. I don't think people were necessarily planning on her actually being in Congress at any point when they were really deriding her a lot throughout Bernie's last run for president. I'm really looking forward to her being able to, push back on the center because she's very, very vocal and very committed to her values. And this decision of Representative Katie Porter's to endorse her, I think, really speaks to, one, the sort of burgeoning alliance between more of the center left and the further left, and two, just the fact that she's likely going to win. I don't think that she would have endorsed if it wasn't quite likely at this point that she's going to win that seat.
Especially for our international audience, like, would you describe us as one of the first kind of Warren supporters and Bernie supporters co-project?
I guess you could look at it that way. Yeah, I mean, Katie Porter, like you said, she was a Warren endorser, and I know there was some bad blood over Nina Turner sort of talking about how Biden is not a great option. I think she compared it to a shit sandwich. So, I mean, there was definitely...
remember who said what anymore?
I mean, a lot of people were saying things. But, yeah, so a lot of, who dyed-in-the-wool Democrats who are don't insult our people, we're really angry at that. But it seems like we're sort of moving past that at this point and acknowledging she's definitely the best woman for the job, I think, and she's also going to be really interesting. I think she'll just be very interesting to have her voice in Congress. It's good to have people who want to be
and speaking
loud
of her
and critical.
Voice, she's not just loud, she is one of the most gifted public speakers in America. There's no question.
She's fantastic. Yeah.
And Ellie, I would ask you, how familiar are the British progressive left with her? You all have seen and liked a million videos that star her, but I wonder if her as a personality or as a separate person, or if it's just sort of, oh, that's the lady who hangs out with Bernie. Is there any kind of, presence there?
Not really.
I mean, I'm always interested in what people focus on when they're looking at us from other places.
So there's an entire generation of people who I guess are in their late 30s now in British politics, or late 30s, early 40s, who are obsessed with the West Wing. So therefore are obsessed with American politics.
There was a collective grimace on this side of the pod
there. I mean, I literally, me and my husband decided to watch it in lockdown because I've never seen it before, and I couldn't get through 3 episodes. I just couldn't.
Yeah.
It was horrifying. The idea that people in power take it that seriously was horrifying.
I liked it when I was
oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say I liked it when I was 12. I would watch it with my parents. And now I'm that was a good show about politics for if you're 12 years old.
Yeah. It got you through the Bush years. That's what it was.
I was I'm so smart. I understand this show. I'm in middle school.
It was really funny, actually. watched a few episodes of the show. A friend had showed it, and it was the first time that I had got the idea that and I didn't even know that it existed. I was like, well, they keep showing the people write the speeches. What are the people who make the movies? Like, this is stupid. Like, what about the people who make the movies? It was the first time I actually looked up, like, who makes movies at the White House was because of that. But yeah, no, I mean, it's, trying to get back off the West Wing and onto Nina Turner's race. Like, Jamaä, do you see this? Do you see her personality as changing a fundamental dynamic in what we, of course, call the Squad, our version of the Mountain? I mean, she is someone who doesn't play ball, kind of famously. Does that give an extra impulse, or does it create a fracture?
I don't think it has any impact. I don't think she's going to be her own thing that stands apart. I think she is going to try and raise her brand and do the work in the way that she feels she should. Any type of political aspiration, if she is fortunate and she gets to be served and takes over from Marcia Fudge at her seat, the path for her is going to be difficult moving forward because you got a redistricting cycle coming in. I think Ohio's legislature is Republican, and if they're going to act a fool against certain people, the newest person in usually is the one that takes it on the chin. So it is going to be a difficult road for her to hoe. But then again, Republicans like to pack every black person into one district, so she might be okay. So I don't know how those dynamics are going to fly. I don't know what the future holds for her, but I know that it's a rocky future. And if she is going to not only maintain that seat in the future in whatever form it's going to be, she is going to have to raise the level of political sophistication that she's been doing currently.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. I mean, I think there's also something to be said for some blunt force, on the House floor these days, especially. I think there's a big audience for it in the Democratic Party, to some extent, a different audience than Ellie's describing, who go to the West Wing for.
I mean, there is one thing, like if this is a one and done, then she can just go ahead and just burn the house down. You know what I'm saying? I think
she's going to do that either way. I think she's going to be going viral on the regular, doing crazy stuff, like challenging everybody. I'm here for it.
Raise her profile through that, and then she exits out with an MSNBC show. I mean, that is perfectly fine as well. You know what I mean? But I think that was a mistake Doug Adams did. He thought that he actually had a chance to win by being moderate there instead of dying on the sword of progressivism, which is probably gave him a lot more afterwards than trying to be like, well, I think I can appeal to these crazy people in this state who thought that a child rapist was a good candidate, but it just didn't work out that way.
Mm-hmm. All right, jumping across the pond, we had a big breakup. Dominic Cummings and Boris Johnson, seemingly. Can you tell us a bit about what was an extraordinary television event? It was, 7 hours of deposition of Dominic Cummings, under talking about the COVID vaccine response, throwing the government under the bus, maybe. Can you just walk us through what happened? Because I think people in America sort of saw this was happening, but not really.
Yeah, so it's not sure. Maybe like Rahm Emanuel is maybe like a good equivalent of like not in terms of politics, but in terms of like the position that they're seen to have within an administration
and pushing that sort of you're referring to almost Rahm Emanuel of his DCCC days when he was the architect of
exactly
of the strategy.
Yeah, so that's how he was seen. So basically, the first thing to understand about Dominic Cummings is that he won the Leave campaign in the EU referendum, which was seen as like a no-hoper, and it was sort of assumed that the Remain campaign would win, and he sort of delivered this like quite shock victory with an actually very good but very ruthless campaign that was like had a lot of untruths in it and was not afraid to really whip up people's anxiety, like Islamophobia. But actually really tapped into something real, which was the sort of alienation and felt by so many people in the country. So he's sort of, and then this brilliant playwright wrote a screenplay about him called Brexit: A Very Uncivil War, and he was like the main character, and he was played by Benedict Cumberbatch. So he sort of has this kind of mystique since then of this sort
and
of. And
he is a bit of a character, right? He dresses very casually, even going out of 10 Downing.
Yeah,
he
so
has
I've actually
these glasses, the head.
I've actually met him. I've actually spent some time with him, and yeah, like when I met him, he was wearing like grey sweatpants with like paint stains on them and a bomber hat, and and he's sort of, I could see why because he inspires like real loyalty with his staff, and I could see why, because he was quite curious and like strangely like lacking in ego compared to other people of his level of seniority that I've met. But he was also like quite ruthless and a bit mad as well. So yeah, he had all this mystique, and then he was sort of brought into government, and a lot of people I know who are sort of involved in the Labour Party were like upset because they were like, "Oh God, he's going to be really good." But actually, I think
bringing in talent. It's sort of like when Bannon went in to the Trump thing. You were like, "Oh damn!" Like he's going to figure something out.
He's more of I think he is more of a Bannon figure. Although I think he would be like not ideologically. I mean, in terms of the position that he occupied, I think he'd be offended if like you said that about him. But actually, he's not afraid to.
They're both idiosyncratic dressers. There's room for both of them. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. But he's not afraid to flirt with like far right politics if it'll get him what he wants. You know, I'm not saying that he's like an angel. He's not. He's willing to.
He's just not an ideologue.
Yeah, he is. But it's sort of less. It's less sort of fire and brimstone than Biden. It's a bit more populist. He kind of is like ordinary people need to sort of like Westminster, our political system is fundamentally broken, and we need to sort of like shake it up by like sort of delivering a shock to the system. But like what that often looks like in practice is like quite racist and ruthless campaign tactics, dishonesty, that like sort of really like corrupting the laws of how the government is supposed to work. That's kind of what's been happening in the government. I mean, to be fair to him, it still happens now, even though he's left. But anyway, he went to join the government, became the chief advisor, although apparently his official title is assistant to the prime minister or something. But in any case, he was super close to Boris Johnson. And then you probably heard about him breaking lockdown and going off to a
This is the scandal, yeah. This is almost the inciting incident for what puts him in this chair today, yeah. Yeah, so the amount of views that got was like bigger than the Olympic opening ceremony.
Wait, I don't know about this.
So lay it out for us.
Yeah.
So basically, the context is in this country, the first lockdown, which happened between like March and June, I want to say, or March and May last year, was like everybody was like really strict. Like, it was like you weren't allowed to hang out with anyone else. You could only stay in your house with the people that you lived with. I think at that point, even single people couldn't bubble with other people. It was, like, really strict. And everybody really stuck by it. It was like, if someone went and sat in someone else's garden, that was, like, shocking, And basically, during this time, him and his wife and son were, I think... Basically, they were seen by an eyewitness, and it was later confirmed that they had gone from London to the north of England, and they'd like taken a sort of tourist walk around this castle in the north of England, in Durham, which is where they were, and it was sort of like this growing scandal every day, and then which eventually he tried to neutralise by coming out and doing this press conference. Which was, watched by like millions and millions of people. Considering it was like just a political advisor speaking to the press, it was crazy how many people watched it. And what he basically said was, it's a long story, but basically he said that he was really unwell and that he'd been driving around Durham to test his eyesight or something like that. It was very silly.
It was the craziest explanation.
Yeah.
It's like you gotta go for it sometimes.
Yeah, so that has made him like quite hated and not trusted by the public. Anyway, like there's an internal power struggle in the top of the government, and he lost, and he left. He got fired, I think, or I don't know whether he left, or I think he left actually, but they said he left. Who knows? But basically, he lost.
It was one of those resignations that everyone knows is a firing. Yeah.
Yeah, basically, and he very poignantly walked out of the front door of Jack Downing Street carrying all of his belongings in a box, even though there's a back entrance where he was obviously photographed by the paparazzi. So, anyway, then various things went wrong in the government, as they always do. There was lots of leaks, basically, and the government, for some reason, decided to blame this on Dominic Cummings, someone who had nothing to lose, who was known for being a bit crazy and ruthless, and also had like a lot of press interest. So his response to this was to go absolutely nuclear and like expose everything that the government has been doing in this like what we call it a select committee, which is where MPs kind of depose sort of politicians and other public figures for 7 hours. Where to even start with his revelation? He said at one point that Boris Johnson wanted to be injected with coronavirus live on TV to show that it was harmless.
That was my favorite.
That sounds like an idea that I was about to say. That sounds like an idea Arun would have and suggest to a candidate.
I don't know why Beto wouldn't do it. No, I'm just kidding.
He also said like tens of thousands of people like died unnecessarily. He said Matt Hancock, who's the health secretary, he was like...
And a noted figure in Boris Johnson's cabinet.
Yeah.
He's one of the boogeymen people know.
Absolute idiot. But yeah, he said... he basically said that Matt Hancock should have been fired over at least 20 things, something like that. So it was just like, I mean, I can barely
remember. He went maximum damage for the jugular over and over again for hours, right?
Yeah. He
was
like,
these people somewhere where I can watch it.
Oh yes, there is. Yeah, I'm sure that
Let's get a highlight reel.
I'm pretty sure there'll be like a highlight reel. But yeah,
I want a supercut.
Yeah, but yeah, he basically and he said that he had evidence for all of it, and and there was a lot of stuff to do with so care homes. So in this country, care homes. There was like around between 30 and 40,000 deaths in care homes, because basically what was happening was the government, people were being taken into hospital with coronavirus and then being discharged back into their care home with it, and they weren't being tested. So then everybody in the care home would get it and die.
Just immediately. Ugh.
That's kind of what happened with the nursing homes in New York, that Andrew Cuomo covered up and then spent several months writing his book about how good he is at handling coronavirus. So there's basically fantastic leadership.
So basically like that's kind of what he said, was that like because the government had said we've put a protective ring around care homes so everybody's safe, and he was just like, that just isn't, they'd never happen.
That you're then injecting with virus, so
good
for you. I mean, I think the question that before we move on to Virginia is this, how much does this damage the SS Johnson? I mean, like, will Boris make it through this? I'm
really sorry to say, not at all. It hasn't damaged him at all. There's some polling out. Yeah,
there's some polling. He's like Trump, the Teflon man.
Yeah. There's some polling out today that shows that the Conservatives are 22 points ahead of Labour. So it hasn't dented their polling at all. And the field work was done after. And the reason for that, I think, from what I know from people who've done polling on it, is that the messenger, so Dominic Cummings himself, is too untrustworthy for people to actually take him seriously. So even though
they're like, that's the guy who said he was going on a driving test.
Yeah, exactly.
Just testing my eyes.
Yeah.
So it hasn't. I actually, like, on a serious note, I actually think like it has done real damage. But what it's done like real damage to like people's ability to believe that government can be good and that things can change.
Yeah.
Because actually, it's just like more shit, more lies. More corruption.
They're all crooks. Nobody does anything, etc., which usually plays into conservative hands, doesn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. And it's so there's a commentator called Ian Dunt in this country. I disagree with him on a lot of stuff because he's like he's in the centre. But he said like actually Dominic Cummings has created this situation where like nobody trusted the system or believed in it. He was like one of the key players in making that a big part of British politics. This kind of like F the system politics, and he like came and gave his testimony sort of, and what he needed really was the system to work and people to be invested in it for it to have impact. And obviously like he's created a situation where it doesn't have impact, and that's like the irony of it. I think that's pretty true.
Yeah. So turning to the great Commonwealth of Virginia, I think for our European audience, they may not be aware that after, Georgia was right on the heels, obviously, but that after a presidential election, one of the first sort of big tests, big elections where people see what's going on, is the gubernatorial race in Virginia. It's especially interesting because it's so term limited. And can you just tell us a little bit about the tradition of that, but then immediately tell us who's on the field this time and what you think is going on, and to give our audience a little more, like our own Julia Doubleday. Jamaä's a data campaigner and has worked for many organizations in that capacity.
Yes, I wear many hats in the Virginia in progressive politics. Nationally known for data, in Virginia, I'm a founder of one of their anchor progressive groups, a co-founder of one of the anchor progressive groups. I'm the chairman and president. That's New Virginia Majority. We do immigrant rights, we do social justice, environmental. It's like the Progressive United Nations in my office. We got everybody there. Virginia and New Jersey are the only two states that have what they call off-cycle elections. This is like after the federal cycle, they're presidential or congressional, then they go ahead. We actually, in the next year, we have statewide high-stakes elections. And in this year, we have all of our statewide leaders, the governor, lieutenant governor, attorney general up, as well as the entire state legislature, which is 100 members in the House and 40 members in the Senate. Virginia is the longest continuous state legislature in the country. Basically, when they founded the country, they decided to have a legislature in Virginia, and then they tried to kill all the people of color. That's kind of how we operate in this state and in this country. That's the MO of America. This election is really interesting for a lot of reasons because governors cannot succeed themselves in Virginia. We have Terry McAuliffe, who's actually running to be governor again. He was governor before.
Split terms, right? So he wasn't, and now will be.
Exactly. That's only happened, I think, twice in the history of our state, where somebody who was governor, they had another governor, and then they elected to be governor again. Usually that never happens. And the main reason why Virginia has this unique thing is our governor has unheard of power to do whatever he wants. He has broad appointed power to everything in the state. On top of, the governor can actually amend legislation and send it back to the legislature for them to revoke. Not just veto, he can actually change the entire bill, and if they can't sustain a veto or get it passed, that's it.
I actually know that.
That's a nice gig.
Yeah, the governor of Virginia is ridiculously powerful. It is, and that's the reason why we don't let them succeed themselves, because you don't want somebody to be that powerful for too long. They at least had that in their column. And another reason why we have our off years is that we are a remnant of the Byrd machine, which were the Dixiecrats who were racist. He built out a system of patronage off of off-year cycle elections in order to maintain power in Virginia, of which many states emulated throughout the country because racism and America and freedom. So
you're saying that, making it a lower stakes election makes it a fewer voters, and therefore makes it easier to organize, the kind of Dixiecrat thing they were doing? What was? I just want to dig in on the mechanism that you're describing.
Well, that, and they also had this is where you send your people to get work, and your people in these lower stakes elections would all get patronage jobs. In what we have here, like a city accountant,
so using the off years to stack the deck for the on years.
Exactly, and make sure that they're organizing their job. They may be work in the secretary's office of the county, but their really job there is to do all the politicking. So that is one of their remnants. We don't do it that way because now it's illegal. Thank you, Hatch Act and other things. But as a corollary and offshoot of that, because we have off-year elections, our campaign finance rules are basically non-existent in comparison to other states. I used to joke early on, when it was really ridiculous, that I could actually take a nuclear weapon from Russia and write it down as an in-kind donation, and it would be cool in Virginia. That's how ridiculous our campaign finance laws were.
Cool if you did.
Yeah.
So it's funny that we were talking, and Ellie, even from her perspective, was like, Virginia's pretty reliably Democratic now, and you immediately said, no, it's not. Can you dig into that a little more, and also talk about this last time Terry McAuliffe ran? It was against Ken Cuccinelli, right? Who is so conservative. He is against heterosexual oral sex, which is not a winning argument, in an election.
Absolutely bonkers. And to your point, when you said that, that's not the only thing that he's against, though. And I'll go into our weird laws in Virginia that just recently got changed. But when she said that statement about it's reliably blue, I said, no, we're a knife fight in a phone booth every year. It is high touch, stabby, and there's blood in the streets every year. You're fighting it out because even in those quote blue elections statewide, we're only winning these things like by 50 and 60 and 30,000 votes a year. We're not blowing people out by like 200 and 500,000 votes. These things are super close.
It's a big state. There's a lot of people there.
Oh, a lot of people, and it's like, you know, it's like the Republicans are usually winning, and then we wait for Fairfax County to come in that's reliably blue to like hopefully bring us over the line, and maybe Petersburg, Virginia, which takes forever for them to count because reasons. But yeah, Terry McAuliffe beat Ken Cuccinelli, who was a blood-spitting conservative, like in the most horrible way possible. So terrible that Trump thought he would be a good Department of Homeland Secretary, person, because he hates people.
Like what he saw.
Exactly. I like the venom that he spits. And so he brought him in there. But not only that, it was true that he felt that, non-procreative sex in a specific way was the devil. He was one of the few people that were like objecting when we wanted to change our blue laws, which in Virginia, up until I think maybe 10 or 20 years ago, it was illegal to have any sex in the state that wasn't procreative for sex, and specifically only missionary.
Ellie's face is so funny right now. Yeah, we have. Okay, I don't know where the term blue law comes from, but there is this. Yeah, there is this term blue law in the U.S. where it's like there's a blue law in Ohio, which is why we couldn't have sorority houses in Ohio, which is like you can't have a certain number of like single women living in a building without men or something. Like it's like really, really outdated laws, and people like don't really follow them, but like they still are.
But they are on the books.
Yeah,
exactly. And it wasn't. Go ahead.
What if you have sex without using contraception in the missionary position, but you don't conceive?
Well, if you it was in your mind, if you wanted
I think it's the attempt
from
that
Jesus,
matters.
then yes, yeah, then that's fine.
I don't even want to tell you what a certain senatorial candidate Indiana said about biological mechanisms of women. I can't, like that. We're not going to do that this time.
And the really messed up part of our laws, it wasn't that he said this thing or nothing. They literally itemized all the things that were linked. And at the time, I believe I was working in the Senate
They were like looking it up of like porn sites.
Yeah, I'm like,
so
what is
else
that?
can you do?
That's the first time I heard the word analingus, and I looked it up on like the Senate website, and I think their blockers didn't allow me to look up some of the terms that they were actually going to like.
Who was the intern that had to do this research? I'm interested.
Like typing it in like with gloves on.
It's like
definitely
it's so
don't.
All right, but we don't have Ken Cuccinelli this time. So do we have like a sensible businessy guy Republican, and are you worried about that?
Oh no, he's a terrible person. So the other guy, and this is where it gets really crazy. So the guy, they had this.
So this is where it gets crazy, folks. Stick with
it. It gets crazy. Virginia's bonkers. So Glenn Youngkin won in the convention, and the Republicans there who have been beating this drum about voting rights and we need voter IDs did not know how to implement their own convention rules because they couldn't figure out the ID requirement that was in fact less than what they wanted everybody in Virginia to adhere to because they're crazy as shit. And then on top of that, we had him. So there was like this whole like outsider thing. There were some insurgents in there who were like Amanda Chase, who I was rooting for because she said she's Trump in heels and she's equally as ridiculous of a person. I was like, I want this batshit crazy person in there because that's good comedy. It's like, I want this there. And she has no chance because even the Republicans would like try to sink her. But what happened was the sane people prevailed because it was a convention and the vote counting was not as transparent as you would expect. The guy they got is a guy named Glenn Youngkin who recently retired from, I shit you not, the Carlyle Group. And he spent 25 years there, so he was there in their entire span of like growing them into this fucked up military industrial complex behemoth. But what he is best known for is screwing over Taylor Swift. He is the one that forced her to re-record all of her masters because he bought them in some kind of like...
Oh, it's that guy. Okay.
Yeah, and I'm like, we're literally sitting there like, how do we recruit Taylor Swift in a video to go fuck?
Yeah, no, it sounds like
this is an open invitation to Taylor Swift right now. This is a message to Taylor Swift.
Exactly.
Come on the show. Come on the show.
Yeah.
Shit on Glenn Youngkin, that guy. And so we have this, and so that's on the Republican side. And then their lieutenant governor, candidate is a black woman named Winsome Sears, who I thought was gone, and she is an interesting character. Let me put it that way. She's like posing on her yard sign, which apparently for all GOP people now, you must have an AR-15 in your arms. Not a baby, not anything attractive. Like, if you're not there with a posable gun that could kill lots of people, you aren't appropriately GOP enough. And so she's doing that crazy shit, and I don't even know who their AG person is because I didn't want to go.
So they're not changing the strategy. The Republican Party in Virginia is going for it again and running, very ideologically conservative and questionable sanity people.
Well, if Glenn Youngkin's ads are really, really good, and he's thanking himself on the whole business tip, and he's self-funding. So he solves a lot of problems that they have with he's trying to like fly over the whole Trump thing, try to get back to the business bona fides, and he's trying to say that we have moved the state too far left with our, getting rid of the death penalty and making marijuana legal like everybody else. Somehow that is like too much, and giving like poor people health care. That apparently is too conservative, but go figure. And so
Go ahead, Julia.
Oh, I was just going to say, so is he like actively distancing himself from Trump, or like not mentioning him, or is it just sort of, he's
trying to be like, they're trying to go to the whole we're post-Trump now conversation. But here's the thing, it's like you're in a trick bag because Trump still has a critical mass of support that is ideologically 100% on board with him, that exists in the state, that they need to win. But he can't adhere to him because after Corey Stewart and a host of other people, Trumpism without Trump does not work. We were the first state to show that was an actual thing because Corey Stewart wanted to run for governor, and he was like, I am 100% on board with all this Trump shit. And then that didn't work. Also, we had like Charlottesville and a guy running a car and a whole bunch of people that kind of was, a precursor to the January 6th, insurrection. Is like people are getting violent and murdered.
Virginia likes to do things on off years. They really do. Yeah.
Exactly. And so it didn't fly, but we're seeing him this is their first attempt to cobble back. Yet to build some sort of a coalition that is going to be a natural tension with itself, like, let's get back the business interests, let's get back the conservative, the pro-lifers, the evangelicals, the conservative right, and this Trump wing of the party, and I need to marry it and somehow get to some measure of independence to side with me over what people presume to be either Terry McAuliffe or Jennifer McClellan, Jennifer Carroll Foy, Justin Fairfax, Lee Carter, and a host of other people. And there's a lot of people.
Well, in the last 2 minutes, can you tell us a little bit about that? Is Terry McAuliffe an inevitability, and is there? Do the progressives have any chance in coalescing around someone? I think we don't have enough time to get into the current lieutenant governor and gubernatorial scandals and problems.
You want to go in there, but yeah. So you have Terry McAuliffe, who's riding high name recognition, and everybody thinks he is the presumptive favorite.
He's a Clinton fundraiser back in the day, just for
exactly. Yeah, he has more money than God. He's like the guy who can raise a lot of money, and he's a known quantity because he was governor before.
He puts out that energy. He looks like a fundraiser, skinny
absolutely.
Guy in a suit, kind of. Yeah.
He is good for a drink if you're ever with him. And the only reason I think he's running is because he didn't get his, ambassadorship to Ireland, which he always wanted. And then you have the progressive community is actually split between Jennifer Carroll Floyd and Jennifer McClellan. Both of these are African-American women who are running for governor. Jennifer McClellan is seen more of the establishment type person. She is a Verizon lawyer, but she has been loyal and has passed a slew of really progressive bills and legislation and gotten Virginia to where she is now. Jennifer Carroll Foy is a much more fiery progressive on the stump, and she has a lot less of a record, but she has been electrifying on the stump and saying all the right things to progressive, like, we're going to do get rid of right to work and all this other stuff, so much so that the outside of the state has been supporting her heavily, and she got to an early fundraising advantage. And then you have Justin Fairfax, who I think just wants to meet people, who's still kind of, we don't know why he's running because sexual assault and all the other stuff, and Lee Carter because reasons. And then you have an independent who was the sister of Marcus David Peters, the person who got killed, and she wants to run and do criminal justice reform independent. And that's where we are with that situation, with the field portion of the progressive movement in the state backing Jennifer McCullen, and the greater progressive community outside of the state backing Jennifer Carroll Foy, and with the establishment by and large mostly backing Terry and slightly backing Jennifer McClellan. So that's where the situation is right there.
Your prediction probably will be that McCullen drives up. That McAuliffe.
McAuliffe wins, but I think Jennifer McClellan has a punching chance. She actually has a real shot, depending on GOTV, field, and turnout.
Cool. Maybe when we find out more about that, we can let our viewers know if any of them want to get involved in that race. I'm sure this will be one where the phones get pretty crazy by the end. Who knows?
Yes.
Jamaä Brickley-King, Ellie Mae O'Hagan, Julia Doubleday, thank you for being here. This was a good one. I feel like we learned a lot of disgusting things.
Oh, yes, especially about Virginia law. That stuff is legal now. You can totally do it now. Just trust me.